So, hi, welcome everyone. Sorry, I just need to change my view. There we go. Thank you all for coming just a little bit early so that we could start on time. Just a reminder, same as the first session, this entire Zoom meeting is being recorded, as you can probably see in the top left corner of your screen. So if you don't want your face to be part of the recording, then feel free to leave your camera off, that is fine. Or if you're happy for it to be on there, then you can turn your camera on so that we can see you, that's fine. And try and keep your microphones muted just to eliminate background noise so that we can hear all of the presenters properly. Again, we've got the chat going for the Q&A time at the end of the session. So if at any point you have a question for a presenter, pop their name in the chat, ask your question, and we have Caroline again monitoring the chat, and she will be asking all of those questions, providing commentary and stuff that was provided during the session during that Q&A time. So please feel free to do that. We've got our deep dives again at the end of this session. There will be flexibility with the deep dive, so if you have any questions about that, just hang around till the end of the session and we can work through any issues, but they will be happening again. Great, and we've got a jam-packed schedule for today's session, so we will jump right in. I just quickly want to introduce Alexandra, who will be introducing everyone today, will be presenting first up. She's worked in communities and family hubs in schools, in churches. She's got a real passion for community development, so what a perfect person to be kicking us off today. So thank you, Alexandra.
Thank you, Sarah. Let me try this again. I'm going to share my screen. Okay. Here we are. Fine? Good. Okay. So, good morning, everyone. Welcome to this week's session. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which I'm living here and now. For me, that's the Kaurna people of the Adelaida Plains of South Australia. And I would like to pay my respects of elders past, present, and future. If you're joining us today on a different traditional land, you might like to share it with us in the chat box. Firstly, I would like to introduce myself. My name is Alexandra Segura, and Sarah was saying I'm passionate about community development. As you know, today we will hear from colleagues with expertise on developing healing communities in different settings, through early year support centers, in schools, and online. They will refer to what is needed in those contexts and how we respond to that. Before I begin, I would like to use a bit of time to invite you to think about a high point in your professional life. When was you most satisfied, and what do you value most about your experience? You might also want to share it in our chat box. Now I will share with you one of my highest points when I was working with the National Community Hubs program, which is a national program funded federally by the Department of Home Affairs. In South Australia, currently there are 8 community hubs located in 8 schools in Northern Adelaida local government areas. In 2019, 885 families actively participated in those hubs. The school community hubs play a wonderful role in strengthening families, especially migrant and refugee families, but also families from local communities, reaching people from culturally and linguistically diverse backgrounds, particularly mothers with young children in different and deeper ways. It's very exciting to see how they provide a welcoming and safe environment where all families become involved. For example, both parents participated in English or citizenship classes, or cooking or gardening, and their children contributing an artwork to an art exhibition or joining a playgroup. It takes intentional effort to create a space in which citizens can get on the chair by assuming responsibility and power. But you know what? Everything starts from very small conversations held among people who care. Building, maintaining, and strengthening relationships and trust are the key priorities in the community hubs. Everyone is included and valued. Building social connectedness is the secret. Community hub leaders, and we have some of them participating with us during the symposium, focus on what matters to the hub participants, people's passions, skills, connections, experiences, and above all, what people care about. What do they have to offer? What are their capacities, abilities, skills, gifts, and ideas that they can bring to the table? Hub leaders work hard to ensure resources are meeting the needs of their families and constantly try new strategies, including lots of role-play activities which participants enjoy and embrace the opportunity to have a go. Hub leaders find resilient, powerful people who have done extraordinary things, who have traveled a long journey to start a new life here in South Australia. Children take part in art and craft, outdoor and sensory play activities such as play-doh and painting, story time, and snack time. The preschool children get to spend time around one another and interact in a supervised, structured, and safe environment. They're learning how to problem solve, share, play, and learn well together before they reach formal schooling. Children have taken time to adjust to being separated from their parents, as many of them have not been left in any form of childcare before. Parents are also feeling confident to separate from their children during crash time, where having regular and consistent staff helps. Hub leaders see whole families creating together, parents and school-age children interacting, understanding the benefits of unstructured, messy, and free playtime, and everyone loving the opportunity to be creative. Parents are also developing an understanding of how they can help their children learn and progress their development positively. They come and try out activities that the students do in class, and they are encouraged to read more with their children at home. Most of all, they have fun. Teachers report children have been better prepared for the school day. For example, bringing correct books, equipment, and a packed lunch, arriving at school on time, and settling more smoothly into classroom. They have also been experiencing higher rates of completed homework, return notes, and improved grades at school. The children have been less distressed in the classroom and engaging a lot more about their culture through food share at the end of the term. Families, especially mothers, are improving their confidence, actively joining in the school programs, attending parent-teacher learning conversations, communicating with the classroom teacher, initiating conversations with the playgroup staff and others, becoming involved as volunteers, joining the governing councils, as well as identifying their own needs and asking for help. Hub leaders see school staff understanding culture more, being more willing and confident to engage families in different ways, creating more welcoming spaces and inclusive activities. Families are fully engaging into the wider community or workforce with support from the activities of the hubs. For example, excursions, visit to local libraries, catching public transport for the first time with other husbands, and many more. They're also making cross-cultural friendships, which is so crucial in developing a sense of belonging. School community hubs are catching people who fall through the gaps of services and other programs. They come because they feel safe and welcome, and hub leaders don't need to worry about visa categories, for example. Families become confident and empowered to access other services. Finally, I would like to finish with this quote from Lao Tse. Go to the people, live among them, Learn from them, love them, start with what they know, build on what they have. But of the best leaders, when their task is done, the people will remark, we haven't done it ourselves. Thank you. So, welcome again to this session today. As we said, we're going to go a little bit more into the practice. And I would like to pass now the screen to Elspeth McInnes. Elspeth is an associate professor of sociology and education of the University of South Australia, Education Futures. She has expertise in child protection education and trauma-informed responses to children and families, and is currently researching the effectiveness of integrated early childhood services. Her other research interests include social policy and social inequality, families and separation, gender and violence, child abuse and child protection, and women in small business. Welcome, Elspeth.
Oh, sorry, Elspeth. You've just got some crackling on your microphone.
You know how to get rid of it.
There we go. It's all gone now.
Good. So, Sarah, will you be managing the change in slides? Yes, okay. So thank you, everybody, for having me here today. It's really exciting to be here. And I think one of my recent highlights was a 3-year project in Fiji working with parents of preschoolers to work out how to help them support their children's developing literacy in a post-colonial setting where the languages of Fiji are really diverse, and yet schooling is in English and not every area has a preschool. So we were there working directly with parents of young children in their homes. And one of the key things for me was the richness of those environments and getting parents to actually just simply see how they were really critical and involved in scaffolding their children's development. Something that, you know, parents in a sense do unconsciously, and draw on their culture, draw on what they know, but don't have a sense of how critical it is to their child's development. And so a lot of it was simply making that visible. And I think that's what a lot of our work with families and young children is about. Today I've just got a short presentation. My co-presenter, Kathleen Wilson, who runs Lutheran Care and Family Zone, has been unable to be here, but I will direct you to a key program that she has been involved in developing and delivering, which is the Being with Baby program, and we'll be circulating a report from that program, so you can sort of see what I'm talking about in a sense in the abstract has translated to an on-the-ground service delivery model, working with families, again, often from highly diverse backgrounds and often with overlays of things like postnatal depression and other mental health struggles. And as the evaluation shows, it makes a huge difference. Yet it's not in a clinical setting, it's not in a hospital, it's not with diagnoses, it's not modelled on that kind of individual way of finding the families that are in a sense seen as broken and trying to fix them. And I think that's what we're all on about. And one of the challenges in early childhood is the sheer diversity of service models, everything from playgroup through to long day care, community creches, family support hubs, and of course they're all intersecting with families with young children, and each intersection is an opportunity to draw people in, to connect them, to form community and relationships. First slide if I could, Sarah, thank you. I apologise if these slides simply are teaching grandmas, wise grandmas and granddads to suck eggs, as it were. But in trauma-informed practice, trust relationships are fundamental, and we often underestimate the value of those relationships. But we know that when young children and their families are plugged in, have people around them, networks that might be derived from family and extended family, people they've formed friendships with, people who share a particular culture, going to health services, you know, infant vaccinations, an assessment, the local doctor, coming to education and family services. All of those things create a kind of community around the child, which means that whatever's going on for the family, they have people to talk to and learn from, and that happens best when people feel that people know who they are. So I guess for me, ground zero is forming connection, learning about people. As professionals, often we're encouraged to see ourselves as the experts, but of course we start from complete ignorance of other people's lives quite often, and we have to do lots of learning to be able to form meaningful relationships and connect with people where they are. And but also we share our common humanity and the importance of, you know, simple things like being friendly, trying to learn other people's ways and language, acknowledging and recognising people. So I take as a kind of a start that reducing isolation for families is critical, and that means being really inclusive as services. And of course that's the centre of the book that Carl has put together and has been a key resource for these sessions, which I hope you've engaged with and have been enjoying. Next slide, thanks Sarah. The thing about trauma, when we say yes, trust relationships are really important, is that it does get in the way of relationships, because that's where a lot of traumatic injury occurs, when other people have treated someone very badly or really scared them, and relationships can come to be seen as really dangerous. So getting past suspicion, getting past worrying that this person wants to exert control over me, because people who have come from trauma, their survival modes often mean learning to be alert, not to trust, not to assume that everything will be okay, because it actually hasn't been okay in the past. So they're often hyper alert to danger, to signals that things are wrong, and especially when taking on new things. For many of us, a bit of a change is like a holiday. It wakes up our senses, it wakes up our routines, gets us out of our comfort zone. But when you've come through trauma, your comfort zone is really critical to functioning, and new experiences are threats. So coming into a new service is a really scary and difficult proposition for people who've come through trauma. As these points here, you know, often people are anxious about what might happen. The support that's offered can be seen as interfering or dangerous, bringing them to the notice of authorities, that sort of thing. People often react to perceived threats and seek to protect themselves, and that can look like rejection, it can look like anger, it can look like distress. So simply being accepting and non-reactive to reactions, and allowing them to have that happen, but that doesn't mean everything's over or impossible. So helping people to calm down, finding ways that work for them to soothe themselves. And another feature is sort of often being stuck in a reaction that elicits for example, if they have a big emotional reaction, say at Centrelink or in a hospital, they might be arrested. They might find themselves in court. They might find themselves criminalised. So reactions can feed other reactions, and that can lead to cycles that simply repeat themselves unhelpfully and reinforce that trauma track. So when we're looking at populations and individuals and families who've come through trauma, starting with relationships is not necessarily just simply a case of assuming it'll be all right if we all have a smile and a hello, but being willing to work with where the person is at, even if that looks like pretty difficult reactions. Next slide, thanks, Sarah. Okay, so this slide is quite small, I apologise, and hopefully you can blow it up a little when you have it on your computer. But on the left-hand side of this, we've got a lovely brain in the middle. This is from the Alliance for Hope International, which is a US-based organisation. But I thought it really helpfully made the links between what happens in early childhood and the whole of life trajectory. On the left-hand side, we have some factors influencing how brains develop, and we know that there are critical and sensitive developmental periods in the first 1,000 days, the second 1,000 days, where children are learning, their senses are developing, their brain is growing, and there are key developmental tasks that are associated with particular age groups, such as language acquisition, learning to walk, learning to share, learning to cope with different environments. And there's this US, again, research-driven concept of adverse childhood experiences, where they got a range of categories, each of the categories of child abuse: physical, sexual, emotional, neglect, witnessing domestic violence, depression, mental illness, imprisonment of a family member, substance abuse in the home, loss of a parent through divorce or death. And then, of course, there's genetics, where we all have a genetic endowment, but epigenetics is about when life experiences trigger the development of particular genetic aspects. So, for example, developing depression can be genetically part of somebody's genetic endowment that won't get expressed unless they have particular adverse childhood experiences. But those experiences in early childhood, the more you have, in a sense, they translate that to a score. The higher you score in your childhood on one of these events, let alone repetitive instances of these events, elevates the risk of lifelong impacts, including chronic disease, psychiatric disorders, cognition, being able to cope at work and at school through attending school, being able to conform with behaviour norms, being able to perform well in that context. Obesity is also linked here. Addictions to alcohol, tobacco and illegal drugs and prescription drugs is here. Having risky sexual behaviours, say multiple partners or unprotected sex, engaging in crime, and of course that's a really socially mediated construct of, you know, if you steal a chocolate frog, will you end up in prison, or will your mum and dad apologise and no more be said? And a lot, as in Australia, depends on racism, actually, as we found in Aboriginal imprisonment rates, particularly of young children. Poverty, of course, is a likely outcome if you're failing to cope and be able to do well in work or school. And then there's intergenerational transmission of those risks. So what happens when children are young, as we know from an increasing and divergent body of research, has critical impacts lifelong. It doesn't just mean they'll forget about it and go on and be okay. It can mean, particularly with those that have compounded and cumulative traumas, lifelong health and social impacts. If we could have the next slide now. Thanks, Sarah.
Sorry, Esther. We're already over 15 minutes.
Oh, sorry. I whizzed through very quickly. Sorry.
That's fine. So
I'll go at the speed of light now. So there's a list of trauma-informed practice principles. Again, these are easier listed than implemented and have lots of challenges, and they echo that Lao-Tzu quote of when people doing it well, they'll see they've done it themselves, because they have, with a little bit of help and framing. Next one, thanks, Sarah. Emphasising the importance of networks, that we need to be sharing people between services, and that needs to be place-based, and we need to be calling the people we know, saying, I've got someone here for you to come and see you. If we do need people to move between different locations, making sure that there's connections, and not simply focusing on, oh, well, we do sore toes, you're here for a sore toe, I don't want to hear about the rest of your situation. We need to be holistic. Next one, thank you, Sarah. So we need to support physical development, social and emotional development, and language and communication development are the sort of three components in working with families. And I just want to finish very quickly that there's a family kit that will be sent out, which was developed for working with children of parents with a mental illness. If the parent, for example, is hospitalised, I don't see why it should be limited to those circumstances when it can help planning. If a child comes to a service and the family for some reason is vulnerable to disruption, that there's a plan for what happens with that child in place. And that helps the child, it helps the family. And thank you. I'll stop there and enjoy the rest of it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Esther. That was beautiful. We will move now to the environment in the schools with James Lenigas. James is the General Manager of Education and Wellbeing at Schools Ministry Group in South Australia, where he develops and coordinates the wellbeing classroom approach in schools together with the group. Welcome, James.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm privileged to be here this morning. Can you all see my slides? I think I might just need to make them full screen. There we go. I'm coming from Port Augusta this morning, so good morning everyone. I'm in the car out the front of Willesden Primary School, in which we have the Wellbeing Classroom established here. And so, yeah, that's why I'm in the car. We've been setting up a new wellbeing worker up here across the partnership of schools, and it's very, very exciting. I'm really pleased to be bringing this to you, and it's certainly not made possible without the input of Dr. Victoria Whitington and Elspeth, who you just heard from. They're both extremely pivotal on this, as well as Carl Bredding and the Communities for Children partners across the state, including the West, Port Augusta, Murraybridge, and of course Salisbury. So we're really thankful for all of their input over the last sort of while. We're looking at developing trauma responsive practices through sort of this wellbeing classroom approach, and I'm privileged to have 10 minutes to quickly share what that is and what we've found through our latest evaluation in partnership with UniSA. So I'm from Schools Ministry Group, and if you hadn't heard of us, we're in South Australia. We generally provide pastoral care worker roles across the state, in which we've got over 300 schools involved. And my particular patch is looking at the wellbeing classroom and how that affects schools and getting that working in as many schools as possible. And I'm privileged because I know what I want to do when I grow up. and that is working with schools to help them feel and be as safe as possible, so that children can learn the most and be as connected to those communities as possible. The Wellbeing Classroom started, it's almost 10 years ago, back in 2011, 2012, this question was asked, well, if we put well-being at the center of the classroom, what might happen? And then if we build the rest of school life around that, does that actually enhance the students' experience of school? Do they have a better time? Do they learn more? What are the questions there? And so we looked at one class.
Sorry, James. I'll just let you know you're not in full screen mode anymore.
Oh, okay. The presentation, or?
Yep, the presentation. It's a little square on the screen. Are you able to? There we go.
How is that? Is that
Beautiful.
better?
Sorry about that.
That's okay. All good. We looked at that, and I don't know if you're in a school context today, if back in 2011-12, if well-being and that word was very popular or used, but from our experience, it was not really. It wasn't particularly used, and not that schools necessarily didn't look after the well-being of students and families, but this idea of actually having a well-being approach was fairly new. And now we have well-being leaders and well-being frameworks, National Student Well-being Framework, etc. So it's become quite a lot more embedded, and this word is very normal now. So we had this one classroom, and then over that 6-year period, we rolled this out across a number of other classrooms and schools. And just last year and just launching this year, we've had this evaluation of the whole school at Salisbury Primary. And this certainly couldn't have been done without the strong support and commitment and tireless hours from Karen, who's on the webinar this morning. She's the wellbeing leader there, and Carol, the principal there. We're really thankful for their engagement and input. And we looked at, well, what will happen if we look at a whole school approach? And the feedback was, well, we don't want to have a deficit view. We want to have, well, how do we make school better for everyone? And we don't want to be taking students out one-on-one and trying to sort of give them some social skills or some learnings and sort of help them with their feelings and then put them back into the class. No, because, well, the class misses out, and maybe the learning isn't actually contextual. I'm not sure if any of you have ever been to a speed dating evening in which you sit at a table with a random person and you talk to them over a series of questions for 5 minutes, you exchange phone numbers, and the bell goes and you've got to move on to the next person. If we look at well-being through relationship, it's kind of awkward to do this. So we want to look at a whole community and a whole school approach. We wanted to help the staff understand that having a relational view of education and looking at, well, how do we help students have better relationships and positive relationships with each other? How do we help of course, the staff, the SSOs, the front office staff, as well as the teachers, have positive relationships with their students? And then how do we foster positive engagement with the parents? If we focus on that, well, what might happen? And we know that, we know from our evaluation that it was a really successful thing. So let's look at that. Of part of this, and I won't get much time to touch on it today, was getting drawings from the students, and a couple of pictures there for some feedback. And I think you'll have these slides available after the presentation. But I wanted to look at we want to build a trust community. We want this community, the school community, to be integrated and connected. We want each student to feel connected to their class, their teacher to feel connected to their class, and then also that class to be connected with the rest of the school and then the wider community. So we wanted a trust community. We wanted to teach, and we know that teaching kids about their feelings and evidently having the teachers understand their feelings a lot more in the classroom, and acknowledging that they are helpful and good, and that they are a form of communication, that if a student feels a certain way, then that is good, and that understanding that and being able to explain that and articulate that can actually help so much, as well as the teacher doing this too. That understanding feelings as a teacher became really, of a standout and really important. Actively teaching key social rules, skills, understanding that there is a way that we do behave, and that if we want to try and achieve something at school, if we want to try and do something with our lives, that there are skills that we need to learn, and that teaching just one kid, just taking them out and teaching them alone and then putting them back into the classroom doesn't particularly work, that we need to do this at a a class level, and as the class learns and develops, this is where we see really key results. We want to build relationships in the community. We took sociometric data and we continue to do that sort of evaluation across our schools that we work with in SA. And we want to look at, well, are the relationships actually developing? Are kids being more connected? Yeah, from that relational view. And then a really key part of the wellbeing classroom model was to ensure strong support for the teacher. There are countless models of kind of giving training, delivering a training session maybe. Maybe there's a handbook which is given to that teacher, and then it's sort of like go and now you're on your own. And that really rarely works, especially when schools are going to be focused on literacy and numeracy prominently. And so we want to, what we found was that continual weekly support for these teachers was absolutely key and essential. Having someone who can almost be that glue person. And for me, that was me at Salisbury Primary, and we have these wellbeing classroom workers across the state. But at Salisbury Primary, this was my role to look at, well, how do I support each teacher with the actual delivery of these lessons, but then also the relationships and being able to observe something and then talk to the teacher. I saw this with this student, and did you realize that? Or what do you think about that? And how do we make this connection? Being able to support Karen, the wellbeing leader, her schedule was so full and so massive. So how do we get the most out of her time? And that ended up becoming through a model called the wellbeing agents, which for me, that's my most proud and most exciting thing of the whole model, which I'll get to in a second. So the aim is to evaluate an innovative approach to building a whole school that is supportive of child's social and emotional development. A whole school approach, a common language, and if I'm a student, if I'm 6 years old and I'm walking through the schoolyard, if I see Mr. G over there and Mrs. S over there and the principal over there, and then Jane, the front office worker, they should all have a common understanding of what I need, especially when I have big feelings, that our common language is consistent, and not just for my teacher, but from all people in the school, because it's a school community. It's not just me and my teacher, it's the whole thing. We then extended that through family learning events, so inviting families in basically for the students to teach their parents about what they were learning about themselves. We used kimochis, which I'll have a look at as well in a moment, but that was such a key part of it too. So how do we build this whole school community of wellbeing? Probably don't have time to go through the stats of Salisbury, but a very diverse place. This is many students had more than one language in the mix, very diverse backgrounds, and as far as the trauma situation is concerned, yeah, a really deep variety of kids who had experienced adverse trauma and kids who had actually quite a healthy childhood. So very strong mixture. So key things for this approach, whole school approach, everyone's involved. If we're doing training, it's for the staff, it's not for one-on-one. And for kids, we're not taking them out to run them through a program. This is a whole classroom, whole school approach. The key thing here is commitment from the principal. Carol's support and advocacy for this was integral for this to happen. This can't be something that comes through the side. Even at a middle leadership level, this must be from the principal, and we're so thankful for her enthusiasm for the wellbeing classroom. Well-resourced teacher professional learning. And this is tricky in schools because obviously that means releasing, or that means taking in time after school. So there needs to be a strong plan about continual professional learning, growing together as a staff, a shared social and emotional language. Everyone needs to be on the same page. Okay, this isn't getting the specialty person in. This is very much a common approach. Engagement across the whole school, leadership, teachers and children and families, not letting anyone slip through. This is for everyone. And then resourcing. So we're very privileged to have Communities for Children funding to make this possible. Within the department budgets at the school and the schools, it can be tricky to find that extra resource, especially for the hours for this wellbeing worker type role or the wellbeing coordinator role. So having external funding is super helpful, and having it just that one step removed from the school too allows a little bit more freedom. And sometimes schools actually need to be told, well, actually you need to grow in this area, and that can be a little bit tricky when you are reporting to the principal. And so having that one step removed, being able to have those almost consultative conversations has been really helpful. And then the best part of it all, the wellbeing agents, which I would love to quickly touch on as we start to wrap up. The wellbeing agents, look, no matter how cool we think we might be, if we get a young person, young professional in, if we're looking at the latest generational research, it doesn't matter. We won't be as relevant for an 8-year-old as another 8-year-old. The wellbeing agents was this idea of taking authentic student leadership and equipping them with real life work, which was to make the wellbeing classroom happen at their school to increase the wellbeing of students. And so they would meet each week. We would give them some sort of activity to take back to their class initially, and then they would go and run it with their peers. So whether it was looking at bravery, whether it was looking at a Komochi's element, whether it was looking at a personality type or a specific social skill, like how to get someone's attention, or a calm down breath when you're experiencing stress, whatever it might have been, it was the students teaching the students. It was a peer-led and peer support leadership framework, and it worked really well. And I'm super proud of these guys. They would go to their class, and at the start it was really awkward and strange. It was a really new idea. But as a couple of years went on, we saw these kids really grow. And these students weren't the natural leaders that we might think of. Initially, these were kids who understood themselves, understood others, had strong empathy, and they were chosen for that reason. There's a quote there from Carl saying that support coming from peers is probably 10 times better than any support that might be coming from someone else. And I want to share a really quick story on that to wrap up. Our Komochis, you've heard me say that a couple of times, are the key tool that we use in the wellbeing classroom. A lot of the wonderful research around brain development and the neurosequential model and whatever it might be can be a little bit overwhelming for when you try and make sense of that for a 5-year-old and they're just trying to learn how to count and read and write. And so the Komochis take a lot of that and really contextualize it for those early years and JP. And I'll never forget, there was a student who he has been the second year of the experience of the wellbeing classroom, and we come in and there was a particular girl who just she had a really tough household to grow up in, and she would often come into the classroom and she'd be under the table. This was her default. Maybe she'd be reading a book sometimes. Other times she'd just have her head kind of buried. This was her default position, trying to be safe in an overwhelming place, that classroom. And this, I remember seeing her come in. Something had obviously happened at lunchtime. She'd come in, sat underneath the desk in her sort of traditional spot. And I remember seeing this boy. So he was a year one. She was a reception. He walked over to her, sort of looked at her for a second. I could see her sort of sobbing a bit. And I'm just sort of observing this. I could have come a little bit closer. And he goes over to the Komochis, and you can see on the screen there the orange one, that's Cat. And this was her favorite Komochi. He took the Komochi Cat, and I've just sort of come closer to try and hear what's going on and what he might say. And he sort of comes along, sits down, and says, I can see you're having a really hard day. I'm here to help you, and so is Cat. And he sort of gave her Cat. She gave her a big cuddle, and within a few minutes she's back at her desk and doing her silent reading after lunch with the other students. And so for me, that was just this real, it was like, okay, there's something going on here. Maybe something's working here. But just really amazing evidence that when we have supportive relationships at a peer level for these kids, that actually is when the huge difference is made, and that's free. So from a funding level, from a school level, that's the best thing. So I'm really proud of what we've been able to achieve, and all things that have been going on there. Look, there's some other outcomes which we probably don't have heaps of time to whiz through this morning, and you're welcome to pick up the report and have a look at that. I'm sure it'll be made available through the resources in the webinar. But look, I mean, 14% decrease in bullying being a pretty significant one across those few years, and attendance rates coming up above 90%, which is really amazing to see. So if you'd like to, talk to me further, just drop me a line, james@smg.asn.au. The wellbeingclassroom.com.au has got a lot more resources. And if you come into the school chat after this, I'm sure we can maybe touch on a couple of questions too. But if you want to chat any further, if you're involved in a school somewhere and this is interesting to you, or if you just want to flesh out some ideas, please drop me a line. Thank you so much for all having me. It's been a real privilege, and I wish you all the best as you make sense of, soothing communities in your context.
Thank you, James. Absolutely has been very good examples and fantastic from both of you. I just have the pressure of the time here, the clock. So let's move now with Leslie and I, who will be talking with us about online communities. Leslie Ann lectures in child development, educational psychology, and child protection in the Bachelor and Master of Teaching program at the University of South Australia. Her research focused on young children's engagement with contemporary music media and their gender role and self-identity development. Welcome, Leslie Ann. Let's try to stay with the 10 minutes.
I will.
Time for the question and answers later.
Thank you very much. Now, do I share my own screen, or Sarah, have you done mine?
I'll get on it right now.
I've got it up if you want me to share it.
Go for it.
Yeah. Okay, so basically children and young people have greater access to digital technologies than ever before in our current climate. So research done by the Royal Children's Hospital in 2017 has found that almost all teenagers, 2/3 of primary school age children and 1/3 of preschoolers own their own personal tablet or iPhone. So what we're seeing now is children's increase in use. Now we know that there's many benefits of children's engagement with digital technologies and media, including their ability to be able to connect with others, and particularly in a time of COVID, for example, where some families are being isolated, being able to connect with peers and extended family is quite good for children's mental health. We know that they need to access digital technologies and media for their education, and they can do so also for their entertainment. And this can be very beneficial for children's learning and development, because there are many apps and games out there for children's learning. And of course, we have information at our fingertips with the internet and the digital technologies. But along with benefits also come risks. Now, there's emerging research that's talking about some of the risks associated with excessive use. So not just normal use of media, but excessive use. And this can include children developing back problems, obesity, decreased engagement with peers and parents and other family members, which can impact children's learning and development, such as language delay, and even the research discussing that children who are excessively engaging with media and digital technologies at an early age are having decreased school readiness. Now we know that children's brain develops from experiences, and there is research that's suggesting that children's neural pathways are being rewired and developing differently in this era than what they have done in the past. Some of the other risks include children's digital footprint, so social media posts and images going viral, which can affect their future employment, can lead them open to cyberbullying, sexual predators, and we also know that children who are connected to the internet are also at risk of seeing inappropriate material. So it could be violent material or sexualized material that we don't really want children to be seeing at an early age. Now, social media use by parents is what I'm going to be looking at next. Parents in the US spend around about 5.5 hours on screen media a day, but some parents are spending excessive amounts of time on screen media, and they're spending around about 9.5 hours. And 7.75 of those hours are spent on social media. So if you look at the photo to the right, you know, this is not what we're wanting to see to develop quality parent-child relationships. So parents that are, you know, engaged in media above being engaged with their children. Social media, they need to develop a balance between social media use and parenting. We know that social media can be very beneficial to parents because it allows them, you know, to connect with others, keep in touch, share experiences and advice on parenting, and support one another. But we do want parents to, you know, have that balance between social media use and parenting, because we know that quality parenting influences children's attachment types and also their social, emotional, physical and psychological well-being, and of course their brain development. So children need that nurturing and connection with parents to be able to develop, you know, healthily. So parents need to, you know, regularly interact with their children, you know, provide times where their children have their full attention, play with their children, and they need to have good communication with their children to build those quality relationships. Now, social media can also come in very, you know, handy in supporting parents. So we can support parents through the cyber world, so to speak. Parents, you know, turn to media at times for information, support and advice. So, you know, there's parenting pages that are set up to support parents, such as the Raising Children Network or the Australian Council for Children and Media, where these organisations simplify research to provide information and advice for parents. They can connect child and family community services using digital media. And one organisation that's done this is Relationships Australia, where they're providing online parenting courses, where they're connecting with parents via social media. And we generally try to connect with parents using social media, using apps such as Facebook, Twitter, and we can have Zoom meetings as well. So this provides us with opportunities to share information, news and resources and activities to connect parents with each other and with children and family services. So child and family services can use social media to provide information for families that they may not know how to find, provide advice and activities for vulnerable families, helping families to maintain connections between one another and with child and family services, and taking established programs into the home. So the Wellbeing Classroom during COVID produced videos for families to help them stay engaged in the program, and that kept them connected and engaged. This also extended the reach and to other families and developed a wider audience. But to do this, to connect parents using social media, we do need to be quite careful. So some of the key things that we need to consider when doing such things is whether they're closed groups or open groups, because the way we would manage those pages would be different based on whether they're closed or open groups. Closed groups, we need that you know, person-to-person interaction. So we need those pages to be monitored by real people, so that we can respond to, you know, families' questions, and we can share their materials, their experiences, they can share amongst one another. We can respond to their concerns, and so that they are actually connected with real people. It's not just them, you know, reading. Some of the more open groups, you know, we may not be able to have that. We may not be able to have parents being able to post on those because it might open up, you know, potential disastrous issues such as cyberbullying or inappropriate posting. Now we do need to, you know, bring the digital world into parents' homes, and parents, you know, can connect via their own digital technologies. And if they don't have access to that, you know, they can access these technologies via community services such as libraries. We can also take it to the home literally. So I was aware that the Salisbury Primary School had to stop things on site once the COVID virus hit. But they didn't want to lose the parents' trust and engagement and connection with what they were doing. So they actually developed and delivered learning packs and activity packs to maintain that family engagement. So basically, I just want to leave the take-home message from me is that take advantage of digital technology and media to connect with our parents and our families so that we can support them. But we just need to be careful in the way that we do that. And we can't just set something up and abandon it. It needs to be regularly monitored so that parents have that continuous connection. And that's it from me. Stayed within my 10 minutes.
Thank you, Leslie, and that was very good. Thanks. So let me go very quickly now to Pablo Gonzalez. Pablo will be the one building up on the report of this symposium and also supporting on the implementation plan forward. So Pablo is an economist, policy analyst, and social service designer who has been exploring what are the systematic causes of intergenerational disadvantage and forecasting impact programs designed for kids, among others. So Pablo, let's see if you could, I don't know, talk in 5 minutes if possible, and then see if we have any questions, because I'm cautious about the time. Thank you.
Challenge accepted, Alexandra.
No problem.
All right, I'll share my screen real quick. And while I do that, I just want to say I feel so happy to be here. I feel like I'm actually socializing today in front of 118 people as I'm speaking. So that's good. I'm gonna try to be real quick because I have only 5 minutes. I work at Nova Smart Solutions, and what we do is our passion is to understand how to make social outcomes happen. And we mainly use 3 inputs. The first one is anecdotes. The second one is conversations. Alexandra, you mentioned at the start of our session today that everything starts with small conversations, and we use that input a lot. But we also like building our strategies on hard data. And this could be qualitative or quantitative data, so we like surveys. We romantically build evidence-based strategies. And when we use the word romantically, I don't mean Romeo and Juliet kind of thing. Well, we kind of do, because we see romantic as characterized by an idealized view of reality. So we bring romance and thinking how things can actually happen. How can we heal communities in this case? But we also bring the evidence-based attached to it. So in this sense, we jump directly into this project to build an action plan. And that action plan, what we want to do is create a series of strategies that will bring together and ideally bring like a common language strategies for all the people that are working on this project and that are working on achieving certain outcomes for vulnerable children and families. It's so great to see people working on the research space or implementing like the well-being classroom that we just heard from James, like listening to all this or understanding how digital technologies are impacting on our children. Like we have many fronts attacking the same issue and we want to achieve similar outcomes. And with the action plan that we want to develop, we really want to create something that it's worth using, sharing, spreading, and that different stakeholders are involved in it. We basically want to make sure that this action plan is succinct. So, very just the things that we need to action. We want it to be accessible, so we want it to have the wording that it's useful for everyone, that it's visually attractive. And most importantly, and this might sound repetitive, but an action plan must be actionable. We want to make sure that the actions that come out of this plan are actionable. How do we do this? And the questions that we're going to be trying to attend or to address with our action plan are these. They will be evolving as we review more research and with the last session next week. But mainly what we have come up with are this series of questions. We have a bit more. I didn't want to go into full detail, but these are the 4 ones that we feel are necessary to address with our report. How did we get to where we are? A little bit of history on policy and what has happened. How can we identify the families that need us the most? Where are they? Who are they? How can we get there? And how do we develop a community of care amongst us? I said and, but I still have another one. How do we identify the resources needed to take action? So what do we have? Who are the people? What are the kind of skills that we require in our community to actually develop and implement an action plan? I think I made it on time, didn't I?
Yes, very much.
If you feel,
I was just chatting with Caroline to see if there were any questions, and suddenly you're like, finishing. Okay, perfect.
If you have further questions, there's my email. Please shoot me an email if you feel like you want to talk about this any further. Carl, I understand, or Sarah, I understand that participants will receive a template for the action plan. I might jump into that as well with you guys, but thank you for having me, and I wish that we will produce something that is helpful for healing communities.
Yes, we want to give, thanks Pablo, we want to give each of you a template so you look at your own situation and you come up with a plan for your own situation, and what Pablo is doing will be an overall one which comes out of all of the work that we're doing here together, and which you can use as a kind of a guide, I guess, for your situation. So thanks Pablo, that's great.
Thank you.
Thank you, Pablo. Caroline will provide us with a little summary of what the comments have been in the chat box. Apparently there has only been one question, which I quickly answered in the chat. It was about if in the community hubs there have been some involvement with Aboriginal local communities. And I have to say that yes, specifically in Karendi Primary School, the hub leader has been very active trying to engage with local Aboriginal communities. And that's all I can say at the moment. So I'll go to Caroline.
Hello, welcome everyone. So just a couple of points. So there was the question to Alexandra, which she just responded to. I think for you, Elspeth, there was a lot of comment about, could have listened to you for longer. Really insightful what you had to say. One thing that probably did resonate a little bit with Alison was around sometimes we need to be taught again, reminded what we already know, but often forget to do, becoming so wrapped up in our daily world. So that was an interesting point of view. So that was really good. So James, once again, everybody was really thankful for what you had to say. It was excellent, powerful, fantastic. Wendy particularly appreciated the video and pre-reading material. It helped to understand the context of your presentation. And I think for you, Leslie, there were just some points around the first 1,000 days, and that brain development and attachment was really important to hear. Once again, they thought that a lot of your points were pertinent and insightful. And Lutheran Community Care just wanted to let you know that they do some online groups as well. And I think, so Alexandra, just to go back to your presentation, there were quite a lot of comments around, you know, it was excellent, grateful, powerful, fantastic. And that Carolyn mentioned about child focus, making kids the agents in their own. Oh, that was you, James. Sorry, I already said that bit. Yeah, so, and Alexandra, there were some really positive comments around that basis of community development that you gave us. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Carolyn. I forgot to say who you are. You are the Community Development Facilitator for Port Adelaide Communities for Children at United ACL. So thank you very much for your participation. It's time for the deep dives. You all know the subjects, and I think they're going to be the same people facilitating those deep dives: children and family centers, childcare, playgroups, school communities, and faith communities. So looking forward to continuing the conversation next week. At the same time, we will focus on leadership, governance, and evaluating what works in developing healing communities, following the presentation from Pablo. And let's go. Have a nice day. Thank you.